Welcome back. In this video, we're going to be starting our look at methods and how we can use methods that already exist from other classes. This video will deal with string methods, so ways we can perform actions on strings. And then in future videos, we'll look at the math class and then arrays. And then finally, we will look at how to write our own functions in JavaScript. So for this one, you could easily get a string any way you would like and save it into a variable. I'm just going to hard code a string inside of name. You can use a prompt, you can grab it from a database, you can grab it from the screen. But for this one, we're just going to set it equal to Kevin, and then we can look at what happens. I'm actually going to set it to just for future set it to Kevin, which isn't case correct. So we can use methods to figure out how to case that correctly. There are a number of methods for a lot of different classes that already exist. So quick JavaScript string methods Google search will give you many more than we'll look at in this video. But if you understand how to use one, you should be able to use any of them. And the way that we're going to do this is we're going to use what's called our object. So our object in this case will be whatever variable your string is saved into. So name is now a string object. And then we want to use something called the dot operator. This is the period on your keyboard. And then we can run our method. And then all methods are going to have parentheses afterwards. Likewise, if you wanted to run something called a property, you could say object and then the dot operator, and then the property you want to run. You'll notice that these methods have parentheses at the end. We may put parameters in there. We may leave them blank. We will just have to know exactly what the method we're using asks for. And for the property, you'll notice that it doesn't have any parameters, parentheses at the end. So for a method, you can think of this as a verb, so something that object can do, and you can think of this as more of a noun, so something about that. So let's start with a property about strings. And I'm just going to alert this just so it's easier to see. So again, our object that our string is stored inside of is called name. And then if I want to use a property, I can use the dot operator. And the property we're going to look at today is length. So you could probably guess, but let's check it out. I'm going to refresh this over here, and you'll see that it's 5. So if I look at my string, I'll notice there's 5 characters in here. So if I wrote Kevin with a space beforehand, and I save this, and I refresh it, you'll now see it's 6. So it isn't the number of letters, it's the number of characters. So a space, any punctuation, letters, numbers will all count as characters. So that is a property. So if you look up a list of properties, you can easily call them now. You would say the object, which is name in this situation, so the variable that the string is stored in, and then the dot operator, which is the period, and then dot length. So this is something more like a noun about it, right? How many characters are in there? So moving on to methods, there is a number of methods that we can use. And again, there's a lot more that you can look up, but we'll go over a couple of them in this video. So let's alert it so we can see it happening. So we can use name, and we can say something like to uppercase. And again, since it's actually performing an action, this is going to have parentheses at the end. And this is going to have something called a return, which is going to give back something. So that's what I'll be printing, whatever it gives back. And in this case, to uppercase returns a string. So this is going to give me whatever I had with all uppercase letters. If I save this and run it again, you'll now see that it's Kevin. One thing to note though is if we do another alert and we do name again just by itself, and I save it and run it again, it will now still say Kevin the first time, but then when I print it out, it's just name. So this doesn't actually get stored, this just returns a new instance of that name. So if you want it to be Kevin all the time, you could save it. So you would say something like name equals name.to uppercase. And this will say return a string with all capital letters and then save it into itself. So if you save that and refresh it, you will see that now it says Kevin, and I'm actually alerting the name now, so it has saved it. So we'll see, let's look at an example of how we can take the name and case it correctly. So maybe instead of just making it all uppercase, I want to make just part of it uppercase. So we're going to look at two new methods. One is called char at. Char at stands for character at a certain index. So here you're going to need to put a number in there. And if you remember from our arrays, when we start counting in Java, it's 0 indexed. So the first letter is actually index 0. So if you wanted the K, you would use a 0 in here. And we're also going to use substring, which allows you to put either one number in here, one index, and then you have the option to put another one. So you don't need it, but you have the option to do it, which we'll look at in a second. So if you wanted to take just the very first letter of their name, which in this case is Kevin, you can say make it all to uppercase. But then what you can do is right on the end of this, you could do it in multiple steps, but we're going to do it in one step. You can then say dot and get actual one character that is uppercase. So char at, and I just want the very first letter. So if you do this, it says make the whole thing capitalized, which is Kevin like this, and then it says grab the first letter. So if you save this back into name, you have now gotten just a letter K, which is a problem because EVIN is now gone because you've saved over it because it used to be name. So what we can do is we can concatenate this and we can say name again because we haven't stored it yet because it does everything on the right hand side of the operator first, the assignment operator. So we can say name dot to lowercase, and that will give me everything lowercase, but we don't want the whole name again. We would have K Kevin if we did that. So we want to take just part of the string. And again, any of these methods can be used on their own or combined with other ones. And they work from left to right. So if you want to make it capitalized first, the order sometimes does matter. So if you have two lowercase, we can use something called substring. And this is going to take two parameters. The first one is going to be what is the very first letter of the new string you want. And this one, since I already have the K, I can now start at 1. And the nice thing is, if you don't put a second parameter in, it automatically goes to the end of your string. So it'll automatically find your length minus 1. If you wanted to, you could also say name.length minus 1 as your second parameter. But it's kind of nice because if you put one parameter in, it will automatically do this. So you could put comma 3 in here, and that will be the first character that's not included. So again, any of these methods you can look up the documentation and find a lot more about. So this is going to say make the name uppercase, and then take the first character, and then make the rest of it lowercase, and take just from the second letter from the first index, and save that, and then we can say see what it looks like printed out. And then if we do, we have a capital K and then a lowercase everything else. So again, just an intro, but it doesn't really matter what our examples were, because if you know the name of the method or property and you know the parameters and you know what it gives you back, you can use any one now because it's your object, which is the variable your string's named in, the dot operator, and then your method or property. So in the next video, we will look at some more of these using the math class, and then we'll look at some using the array class.